Okay, today we're going to talk a little bit about the ka'ara, the Seder plate, or we could say the evolution of the Seder plate, because it wasn't always the way we do it today. You look at the Haggadot, there are diagrams of the ka'ara, of how exactly to place the matzot, and all the elements, and not always you have place to put everything on the ka'ara, on the plate. The thing is, and we have to have in mind, I think I mentioned before, that at the time of the Bet HaMikdash, when we had the temple, the whole Pesach, the whole Seder was around the meal, and you only had three elements. Pesach, matzah, umaror. You had the soft matzah. On top you would put a piece of the meat and some herbs and wrap it. That would be the first burger, or maybe it's a mekmatzah. That we should have called it. But they had the matzah, Pesach, maror. That was it. Very simple. And once you eat it, everybody starts singing the Hallel, and you walk out of this with a great feeling and experience and the memory of how at that moment of eating, everything is burned in your memory. After the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash, that's it. This whole thing was lost, and the rabbis wanted to make up for it by recreating something, the feeling, the excitement. So they said you have to have a lavish meal, beautiful meal, and tell the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, of the Exodus as you go along. And they said you have to have a meal with the table manners and whatever was the norm among the Greek nobility at the time. So they spoke about having the matzah and the maror. They couldn't have the korban pesach, the sacrifice. So matzah and maror, we're talking after the destruction. So only matzah and bitter herbs. They added the karpas, the celery, and the dipping in order to emulate the practices of the Greeks, because this is how they used to eat. First have appetizers, and also to make the kids curious and make them ask questions. So we have now matzah, maror, karpas, and dip. Then they wanted to. So the karpas was the first dip. And the additional, karpas was the first, but the additional. The original dip that they wanted to keep for the Seder was to dip the maror in a certain dip which they called hazeret. So now we're adding the elements of matzah and maror, karpas and dip, and a dip for the maror later on. And you have to eat. So shnei tavshilim. You have to have two types of food. So when you look at Maimonides doesn't even mention the term ka'ara, like a Seder plate. Just to bring on the table all those ingredients and the food. The first time we have anything that resembles a ka'ara is actually not a plate, it's a basket. It's a basket. And it's mentioned in the book Orchot Haim by Rabbi Aaron of Lunel in Provence of the 12th century or 13th century, and he says the following: ואחר כך מביאים לפניו סל אשר בו 3 מצות וכרפס וחזרת ושני תבשילים. That's it. The whole Seder, the basket or the ka'ara has matzah, karpas, hazeret for the maror, and shne tavshilim, and 2 types of food, אחד צלי ואחד מבושל, 1 roast, 1 cooked. הצלי זכר לפסח, ומנהגנו לעשות הצלי מזרוע בהמה. The roast meat is in memory of the roast sacrifice of Pesach, so people would eat it. It's not just symbolic zroa on the shank bone on the plate as a symbolic thing, but this was the real food. This is what you eat. והמבושל זכר לחגיגה, and the cooked food is in memory of the korban, the additional korban, which would be a celebratory korban to celebrate the holiday, because 1 lamb wasn't enough for all the people who came to the holiday, so they had more animals, more sacrifices. And it says, והמבושל עושים ביצה זכר לאבלות בית המקדש, ויש אומרים לפי שאנו אומרים הוציאנו מהעבדות לחירות ומעבר ליום טוב. And the cooked food is boiled egg, Why boiled egg? Some people say because of mourning, because of like avelut, because we mourn the destruction of the temple. But it's strange, why would you have this sign of mourning on the table? And some say because Hashem took us from avdut leherut me'ever liyom tov. Hashem rolled like it's a spinning wheel. The egg rolls, so Hashem rolled spun the wheel, and we moved from slavery to freedom, from mourning to celebration. Some say because it's easy to cook. The original reason, I think I mentioned it when we studied the Gemara that speaks about that, is because the common tafshil, the common food at the time of the Gemara was dag ve'betza she'alav, fish with egg. And it didn't mean boiled egg, just scrambled egg. You dip the fish in egg and you fry it. So there's dag ve'betza she'alav. So the Talmud originally said, some people didn't have the means to put too much food on the table. We can't even imagine it with today's economy, that everything is so easily available. Back then, to have meat or to have a lavish meal was not easy. So they said, okay, dag ve'betza she'alav, take a piece of fish, dip it in egg, fry it. Here you have two dishes. The egg is separate, like in the fish. But the egg became boiled egg. Some say it's because of mourning, and because of that, it says, כשחל י"ד להיות בשבת, אין משימים בשר ביצה. They wouldn't put the egg in the basket if the 14th, if Leila Seder falls on Shabbat, probably because, even though he gives a different reason, because there's no korban, additional sacrifice on Shabbat, but probably because you don't show avelut mourning on Shabbat. So, then he says, ויקח מן הכרפס ויברך בורא פרי אדמה ויטבול בחרוסת. So you take the karpas and you dip in the חרוסת, ולא יברך על החרוסת, כמו שאמרו במשנה, אין חרוסת מצווה, ואינו אלא לזכר בעלמא. חרוסת is not a mitzvah. It's only a symbolic thing. But originally, again, if you go originally, they used to have haroset all year round. They had something called haroset. They would dip the vegetables in. Some would dip it in salt water, some in vinegar. And why would they do that? They would do that מפני התולעת שנברא בו, הנקרא בלשון רבותינו קפה, שהחומץ ימיתנו ולא יסתכן בו האוכלו. שאם יאכלנו חי יבוא לידי סכנה. They were afraid of a certain type of worm that was rampant in those vegetables, and probably they had cases where people ate it, and those worms kept reproducing in the stomach. So it was it's a known folk medicine. So you dip it in vinegar, and the strong vinegar kills the kappa. The modern scholars figured out it's in Greek it's kempe. Yeah, kempe is this kind of worm, and but when you spell it in Hebrew, the M falls and it becomes kepe. But it was a real danger, and this could still happen. It's like it's an interesting cautionary measure. Actually, we know of someone, not exactly worms, but I don't know, some people are eating, but a lady who decided to go healthy, and for a couple of months or a year, only ate kelp. Remember I told you about that? She ate only fresh kelp, algae. And at a certain point, the algae took root in her digestive tract, and her whole digestive system became sleek and slippery, like like tubes, like pipes that are covered with moss. And as a result, she couldn't digest because there was no pull and no traction. So one has to be careful. So that's why they used to have it. Today we don't have it. Actually, the vegetables that we get, the herbs and the lettuce, are pretty clean. And those who come from Israel, the bodek or hasalat, there's such heavy use of pesticides to make it sort of bug-free that Rabbi Shlomo Amar, that former chief rabbi of Israel, said you're not allowed to eat them because it's dangerous, because the pesticides are dangerous. Then he says, קודם שיתחיל ההגדה, מגביה אסל על כתפיו. Because they had everything in the basket, the person who says the Haggadah would take the basket on his shoulder. Today we do it with the Seder plate, we move it around, but it was much easier when it was a basket. Also probably because he's in Provence, right? So they come to the Haggadah with a picnic basket, right? Like they have wine here and the matzah here and all that. It's easy.
This was at the time of Rashi, more or less.
Yeah, a little after Rashi, about 100 years after Rashi. And then he says this: "Ve'achar notlim yadayim shenit." When they finish the Haggadah, they wash their hands again, and they say al netilat yadayim. Mipnei tibul ha'chazeret v'hamatzah shegam hi tzricha tibul. They have to dip the chazeret and the matzah. Some say you have to wash for that. But look what he says. Very interesting. Why do you have to wash again? You already washed before the karpas, right? He says, לפי שהידיים עסקניות הן, ואפשר שנגע בדבר מטונף בעת שקרה ההגדה. Says our hands go many different places. We don't know if we touch something that will cause us to we need to wash hands again. Back then it was people would scratch their head, touch some parts in their body that are not clean. Maybe you have a dog and you petted the dog during the now you have to wash again. So, omnam im barilo, if he's sure, shelo naga betinuf, en tzrichim netilat yadayim shenit. If you know you didn't touch anything, you don't have to wash again. Of course, today this would seem preposterous because in the order of the Haggadah official, it says magid rohtzah, you have to wash. But that was a later development. They didn't have it back then. ואחר כך מברך על המרור ומטבל בחרוסת. And then you dip the maror in the haroset. But this maror is interchangeable. When he speaks about maror, it's hazeret, it's the same thing. But people misunderstood that. It says in the early literature, when you say maror, bitter herbs, or hazeret, which many people translate as horseradish, so they say, wait, maror and hazeret. So we need maror and hazeret. So some people have one plate with lettuce, and they will call it maror. Another plate with more lettuce, and they will call it hazeret. Some people have parsley for the maror and horseradish for the hazeret. And some people have a dip called hazeret, which is made of ground horseradish. And for them, it is not kosher if you don't cry. It has to be so sharp, so biting, that you have to cry. And the maror also is so bitter that you twist your face when you eat it. We don't have to have all that. We don't have to go with suffering. Enjoy the meal. No, lettuce has some bitterness. It's enough. You don't have to go with arugula or other herbs. But originally, if you want to know what was the original Seder plate like, it was matzah, maror, dip, and 2 types of food. That was it. So now we each follows his minhag. We'll conclude here.